These are 5 pieces of workout advice I still see given today that science simply doesn't support anymore. See, I've conducted plenty of studies myself, and I read up on the research all the time. So let me break down each piece of advice. See, people used to recommend super slow tempos to maximize muscle building. And to this day, technique cyborgs will use extremely slow eccentrics because they think it will boost muscle growth. But does it really? See, we have 2 recently published review papers on tempo and technique more generally, both finding that as long as your reps take somewhere in the neighborhood of half a second to 8 seconds, based on all the available research on tempo for building muscle, you're likely fine. You're building just as much muscle as if you went slower. And in fact, I'm aware of one more review paper, the latest on the topic, that has also found the same thing. That's not to say going slow is always bad. There are use cases. If you're dealing with pain, for example, and you want to reduce the load on the bar while keeping the tension on the muscle high or whatever. See, ultimately, whether you go slower on each rep and do fewer reps with the same weight, or you go faster and you have to do more reps with a given weight, the real thing that matters is getting close to failure for hypertrophy. Which road you take doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. So no, super slow eccentrics aren't necessary. With that being said, controlling the eccentric more as you reach into the stretch and pausing in the stretch might not be a bad idea. There's not really any studies on this yet, but based on the research finding a benefit to the stretch more broadly, spending more time in the stretch, at worst, same growth, at best, maybe a bit more. But let's summarize. As long as you're using a tempo that is at least somewhat controlled, and each rep lasts between about a second and 8 seconds, it is mostly personal preference. I prefer a slightly more controlled eccentric and a slightly more explosive concentric, and I prefer pausing in the stretch and controlling the stretch a bit more. But it is mostly personal preference. There's no real evidence to say you need to control your eccentrics a ton. Sorry, just finishing up my set of slow eccentrics. And now, let me set my rest timer, 3 minutes. Except no, that's not supported by the evidence anymore. See, I used to think rest times of around 3 minutes or more were better for hypertrophy, because that's what maximizes performance. And although that's true for strength, long rest times do seem to help out maintain performance, help you lift heavier on each set, which is important for building strength. For hypertrophy, that may not be the case. We recently published a meta-analysis on rest times for muscle building. When looking at all of the available research, it turns out that resting for 1 to 2 minutes was sufficient to maximize muscle building. Going under 60 seconds of rest between sets wasn't ideal. But equally, going over 2 minutes of rest between sets didn't really seem to increase muscle growth any further. So if you've been resting for more than 2 minutes between sets, that's totally fine. But you can cut it down to 1 to 2 minutes and you'll likely see the same muscle growth. Likewise, if you've been resting for less than 60 seconds between sets, you might not be optimizing growth. But if you have a real preference for either approach, that's totally fine. It seems like a variety of rest times are still effective, but 1 to 2 minutes is my recommendation. Closer to 1 minute for isolation movements, and closer to 2 minutes for compound movements, especially lower body stuff. For a long time now, people have been claiming that intensity techniques, things like drop sets, paired supersets, pre-exhausting, myo reps, myo match, even more stuff, can help you build more muscle than just traditional sets. But is that really true? Let's start with drop sets. As you just saw me perform, drop sets are actually one of the more evidence-based techniques. A meta-analysis by Coleman and colleagues found they can build just as much muscle as traditional sets in up to 30 to 60% less time. So they're pretty good, but they don't build more muscle than traditional sets. In fact, to get the same stimulus, you might need to do an additional 30% sets with drop sets compared to traditional sets. Another intensity technique is the same muscle group superset, where you do an isolation movement followed immediately by a compound movement for the same muscle. People refer to this as a same muscle superset, a pre-exhaust, or whatever else. But the truth is, as far as the research goes, we only have a couple of studies, and the benefits aren't super consistent. What about things like myo reps, or myo match, or insert any other technique? By and large, there's not really any research to support them. Now, there is some cluster set research that you can draw upon for things like myo reps, but even that isn't compelling, and it doesn't suggest it'll help you build more muscle compared to straight sets. Straight sets are in fact the standard, and while intensity techniques can help you save time, the time saving is just about the only benefit, and most of these techniques don't even have research backing them up. But you know what is backed by research and what will help you build more muscle? MyoAdapt. MyoAdapt is the smart coach in your pocket. All of the latest findings in exercise science, like the fact that drop sets can help you save time, and the fact that paired supersets, like supersetting a bicep and tricep movement, is good for time efficiency. All those are being incorporated into MyoAdapt as time progresses. So, if you want to register interest and be notified of MyoAdapt planning launches, go to myoadapt.com and sign up to be notified when it launches. You'll receive both a free trial and a lifetime discount. I'm confident in saying nothing else is like it on the market currently. So if you've been holding off from trying different apps, hold off no more. MyoAdapt is coming. Oh, didn't catch you there. Just did my one set for my check for the week. See, people back in the day actually trained like this. They just did one set for a given muscle in the whole week. And the thought was, that was all that was needed to maximize muscle growth. Doing more than one set was considered overkill. Back in the day, people like Arthur Jones, that eventually spawned the whole high-intensity training movement, actually considered that anything over a set was just a waste. And this became a quasi-cult-like thing. People who believed that one set was actually everything you needed, and that anything more wouldn't improve muscle growth any further. And some early research, like Harpinelli and colleagues for example, actually suggested this was true. But the truth is, as I'm sure you know if you watch this video, that more volume does lead to more growth. And look, there is a silver lining to this whole one set high intensity training business. It's that even with just 3 or 4 hard weekly sets per muscle, you can likely still build muscle. That's what both the biggest study on volume to date, a meta-analysis by Palin and colleagues suggests, and what our own study in trained lifters by Herman and colleagues suggests. Just 4 sets a week might be enough to increase muscle size, even in trained lifters with 5 days of experience. But a single set, while that might be fine for strength, for hypertrophy, likely isn't even enough to start seeing improvements in trained lifters. Instead, based on results by Palin and colleagues, more is more. More volume will lead to more growth, all the way to 30 or even 40 fractional weekly sets. If you want more out of it, you gotta put more in. For your best muscle growth, you should likely be in the 20 to 30 weekly set range, counted fractionally, meaning that compound movements count towards your tricep, for example. I have a whole video on the study you can check out here, for each muscle. You can go even higher than this if you're trying to specialize and your recovery. But yes, more is more, and you should do higher volumes for your best muscle growth. Last but not least, supplements. As much as it pains me to say, you can't buy your way to gains. In the early 2000s and the 2010s, GNC would have you think every single supplement was necessary to really build your best physique. Turns out, science hasn't really backed any of these, with a few exceptions. Let me tell you what supplements you should probably take. The main one that I would actually recommend is just creatine monohydrate. Creatine is the supplement that's received the most attention in the exercise science research. Based on a recent meta-analysis, it can help you build up to 3 pounds more muscle in a year. It's safe, it helps you with strength, with size, with power. Take 3 to 5 grams a day, and that is the main supplement you need to worry about for hypertrophy. Another one is protein powder. Yes, whey protein powder is the gold standard as far as building muscle goes. But even casein protein or a plant-based protein will build plenty of muscle. The main thing here is convenience and the fact that it can help boost your protein intake to optimal levels. Maybe close to 1 gram per pound or even 1.3 grams per pound. Remember though, protein powder is supplemental to your diet. You can meet all your protein needs from just food. With creatine, however, you can't quite do that. So, creatine first, protein second, and a few supplements for health. Here they are. Rapid fire. For most people, vitamin D is all you need. If you're not getting much sun, it's probably worth taking 1,000 IUs a day, you're covered. For some people, especially if you're not having much fatty fish, omega-3s are a decent idea. Just EPA is fine, omega-3s are fine, not a huge effect, but if you want to optimize your health, it might be worth taking a little bit. Finally, if you're in a severe calorie deficit and you feel like you might be struggling to meet your nutrient needs, taking a multivitamin might be a decent safety blanket to make sure that you're not missing out majorly and majorly deficient in any given micronutrient. Congratulations, you've covered your supplement needs. Bro science, destroyed. Clothing, Rascal Apparel. Go to rascalapparel.com, shop your favorite designs, most comfortable, stylish, whatever you want to call it, durable, nice clothing I wear in the gym. Code WOLF at checkout for 10% off. Enjoy your clothing. Support me in the process. Those are 5 pieces of workout advice I used to think were good, but actually probably aren't worth implementing. If you'd like me to coach you, consider taking a look at the link above to see what I offer. Dr. Milo Wolf, Workout Myths. Until next time.